Welcome to Right On with Tom Fallwell, a bi-weekly podcast focusing on interviews, novels, reviews, and upcoming releases from indie authors. Now, here's Tom.
Hello and welcome to episode 13. I have with me today author Asher Wismer, whom I'll be talking with at length soon. I also have a couple of book reviews for you and some event news some of you might enjoy. Additionally, I have a special treat for a book reading today. This will be a reading from a work in progress that I'll tell you about shortly. But before we get started, I have a word from one of our great sponsors. C.G. Blade's pseudoverse novels are a sarcastic look into mankind's race to develop the first conscious artificial intelligence and achieve singularity. The problem is that most of the runners in this race are sadistic, hell-bent on destruction of DNA as we know it, and have a fondness for those missing a Y chromosome. Why, you ask? From cobalt to crimson to emerald, this is one wild, mysterious roller coaster ride as a hidden puppet master is slowly but surely gaining ground on humankind. C.G.'s newest novel, Onyx, goes back 26 years before Cobalt and explains the beginning of it all. Will humanity finally become steady? Tropa is all around us now as heliotrope starts to take shape. We hope you enjoy this little slice of science fiction heaven which fuses historical science fiction, satire, horror, and plenty of hidden Easter eggs along the way. Join us in liberating the pseudos from Pseudosynth Press Publishing. I have a couple of book reviews for you today. These are reviews written by readers and can help you find new books that you might find interesting. Links to these books will be on the podcast page.
This review for No Pit So Deep, The Cody Musket Story by James Nathaniel Miller II was submitted to the Reader's Review Room by Elizabeth Horton Newton. You can find it at readersreviewroom.com. This is for a Christian suspense romance novel by James Nathaniel Miller II. The title of this book by James Nathaniel Miller II, No Pit So Deep, captures the complex difficulties of a war veteran suffering from post-traumatic stress syndrome. However, Cody Musket is not the only character suffering from PTSD in this intense romantic thriller. Brandy Barnes is a young single mother whose work as a journalist has put her in danger. Danger Cody Musket steps in to rescue her from. None of this is evident at the beginning of the book when Cody, Brandy, and Brandy's daughter Noxie are first introduced. It is many years since the couple met, and there are few references to those early days of their relationship. It is through a deadly occurrence that the story flashes back to the incident that brought Brandy and Cody together, the moment that changed the course of their lives. This is a story of miracles, the miracles of survival of body and spirit, and the human need to connect with others in spite of painful pasts. It's apparent the author knows a great deal about war and suffering. He also knows a great deal about baseball, as Cody's career is vividly described throughout. Since this is the first book in the series, it ends somewhat abruptly, leaving the reader hanging with the question, what happens next? I recommend this to any reader who enjoys a clean romance with a significant amount of action to keep things moving along. It is certainly inspiring, although at times it may seem unbelievable. Overall, it is a well-written book. And just to let you guys know, if you're interested in checking this book out, there's no need to be hanging on for that cliffhanger anymore. He has book number 2 out, and it is No Pit So Deep, The Cody Musket Story, Book 2. You can find this at readersreviewroom.com by searching by author or by book title.
Parallel Worlds by Wynne Stevens was an unexpected pleasure to read. It's reminiscent of everything that I loved about The Notebook, yet having its own flair and uniqueness. The narrative starts with our perception of reality and the interpretation of that reality. It's a brief introduction as a segue into the essence of this wonderfully woven story. Parallel Worlds is a story of acceptance, sacrifice, and redemption. It's a journey to save one soul while simultaneously allowing that positive energy to encompass another's reality or existence. 3 seconds can be a lifetime, depending on what we do with them. I love the concept of God that when used throughout the story, it wasn't presented in a preachy manner, but flowed eloquently, interwoven into the plot to move the narrative forward. I also enjoyed the explanation of a soulmate, and how allowing yourself to truly merge with one created for you can strengthen and enhance all that you are. Albeit, rejecting that merging of spirit can have detrimental consequences, just as choosing a path of corruption and greed can send you spiraling down an imperceptible decline of moral turpitude and destruction. The storytelling from Jason's demented mind was compelling and extremely touching. It truly caused me to feel for the character as he suffered through his trauma and past mistakes. However, there can always be redemption if you know where to look and accept it when it's offered. Emily's naivety and loss made her the perfect counterpart for Jason Abrams, and their friendship and bond was heartening. I would definitely be reading more from Wen Stevens and recommend Parallel Worlds 100%.
Next up is an announcement about an author appearance some of you might enjoy. Author Ruth Burrows will be at the Ithaca, New York Barnes & Noble from 2 p.m. to 4 p.m. on a panel of local authors Saturday, August 26th and Sunday, August 27th. She will be promoting her science fiction romance, The Liminal Key, and 2 other science fiction novels. If you live in or near Ithaca, head on out and meet Ruth at 614 South Meadow Street in the Tops Plaza. Today I have for you a reading that I've created from my current work in progress, Corinthor Niusi. This can be considered a rough draft and is most certainly subject to change, but I wanted to give you all a taste of what's coming. This is a book I'm co-authoring with the wonderful Erin Michael Hall. There are 2 main characters in this story, and currently I'm working on one of them, a man named Torian. It will be late this year or early next year before you can expect this book, but I hope you will enjoy this little tidbit. Torian sat with Maggie near the hearth in his home as they talked about the progress of Ariana's healing and the events of the past few days. "Will she be well enough to travel?" Torian asked. "Not by horseback, but she could travel in a wagon or coach. She still has much healing to do." Maggie eyed Torian thoughtfully. "Then you've decided?" Torian nodded. He had been pondering all that had happened and felt there was only one solution to ensure Ariana's safety and continued recovery. "I spoke with Devron, and he's agreed to lease my property. He said something about giving Loudon his own farmland, and there's plenty of land here that can be used for growing crops. I'd rather Loudon be here anyway. He's a good man and good in a fight. He can watch the place proper." "What about the constable?" Maggie seemed to be carefully examining how he responded. Torian noted her analytical gaze and grinned. "Devron sent word to the overseer in Calvia. If Haviland's dirty, Odoran will handle it. But even if the response from Calvia is favorable, it would take too long for any troops to arrive here, and I know the raiders are seeking to silence Ari. I've considered all the options. I think the best course is for us to leave Eldridge." Maggie smiled. "Choices are the only true freedom we have in this world. I think yours a wise one. You'll be going to Saluna then?" His past conversations with Maggie came to mind, and he turned his eyes toward her with an inquisitive gaze. "Megs, what is happening to me? How can I do what I did to the raiders when they attacked my home? Why now?" "There's much you have yet to learn, Tor," she sighed. "About many things, but mainly about yourself." Torian waited for more, not letting it end with just that. His gaze intensified, his eyes all but demanding answers. "You can't learn it all at once," she continued. "Knowledge must come in steps, a bit at a time. What I'll tell you now is that you're more than what you think you are. You have abilities you're not even aware of, and the moon feeds these abilities in ways you cannot yet understand. You have connections, bonds, that will begin to show themselves in time, links with the moon and with the panther you've seen." "If I have these abilities, how do I control them?" he asked, perplexed, but recalling how he had blinded the raiders. Maggie let out a heavy sigh. Your answers lie at the leather tisa in Saluna. Take the scroll I gave you and give it to Cassia. She will guide you. There you will learn many truths that you must become aware of before you can choose the path you'll take. Torian shook his head in frustration. Why couldn't she just tell him? Why must he wait? It seemed Maggie knew far more than she was willing to say. What is the panther? He asked, wondering if it was some form of spirit. There's a bond between you that goes beyond mere acquaintance. You'll learn more of this in time. Just know that the panther is a friend, not an enemy. In fact, more than a friend. Torian was not getting the answers, and his frustration grew. But Maggie raised a hand, cutting him off with an exasperated sigh. I can say no more, young hunter. Such things must be revealed in the proper way, at the proper time. Go to Saluna. You'll find the answers you seek there. Torian relented, but his frustration was apparent. He didn't understand. Why the evasiveness? Why the secrecy? Aside from the tragic event of his father's death and those of recent events, he had led a normal life, never anything out of the ordinary. Now, as if out of nowhere, his life was turning upside down. The hunter had become the hunted. Before we get to the main feature for this episode, here's another word from one of our sponsors, without whom this podcast would not be possible.
Are you a new indie artist looking for a way to market yourself? Maybe it's time to go indie now. Go Indie Now is an online platform that highlights, fosters, and supports indie artists of all art forms. Our shows on YouTube do everything they can to bring an audience to what you're doing. So head on over to goindienow.com, find our channel on YouTube by searching Go Indie Now, all one word, and remember, it's always time to go indie now. We'll see you there.
Hello and welcome again. Today I have with me Asher Wismer, an author that I haven't heard of before, but I've been looking at his book. It looks pretty interesting, and I think you might be interested in hearing more about him. So let me introduce to you Asher Wismer. And Asher, say hello and tell us a little about yourself.
Hi, Tom. Great to be here. I am a writer from Maine. I grew up here. I was raised here by my father, who was also a writer. He actually published 4 science fiction books in the 1980s and 90s. And so I've had writing in my blood for most of my life. My first book, my first novel, has been published this year, and it's called Sun-Grown Wings. And it's the culmination of about 15 years of kind of pecking away at writing as a hobby, trying to get it done. And I've finally actually managed to get something published. I've had a few short stories published, but this is my first novel, and I'm quite excited about it.
Well, your publisher is Wild Wolf Publishing?
That's correct.
Is that a local publishing company? Or
Nope.
Do they specialize in indies? Or?
Yeah, they're a small press in England, actually, and they specialize in mostly horror and thriller-related writing. My book is a bit of an outlier. It's a fantasy book, but I was actually published by them. My very first publication was from Wild Wolf in 2009. They published an anthology of zombie stories, and I submitted to that and was accepted. And the name of the anthology is Holiday of the Dead, and it won the This Is Horror Award in 2011. So they were my very first publisher, and when I finished my first book, I submitted to them, essentially giving them right of first refusal. And to be honest, because of their usual type of book, I didn't expect them to publish it, but they liked it, and they took it.
Excellent. Well, that's always good.
Yeah.
So your book, The Sun-Grown Wings, and I take it this is going to be a series?
I'm hoping. I'm working on notes for a second book right now. The first book is It's basically a standard fantasy novel. It runs the usual sort of quest type of book. And I had the idea for it as something that occurs in the very far distant future. So it's not a typical orcs and elves type book. It's actually more in line with Terry Brooks' Shannara series. It takes place on our contemporary Earth, but so far in the future that a lot of what we know is unrecognizable. So I am hoping to write a second and maybe even a third book, but that's in the future right now.
Okay. How did you come up with the concept for this?
Well, I was working at a dead-end warehouse job in 2014 actually, and I was doing something mindless and not really thinking about work, and I had in my mind a sudden flash of an image, and it was so vivid and clear that the minute I got on break, I ran to a computer and wrote down an outline of what became the actual book. And the image was of a person falling into the open mouth of a volcano, and another person sort of diving in to try and rescue the first person, but the second person has wings. And that image was colored in, it was so clear and so vivid that it sprang this whole world of humans and human-animal hybrids and general adventure and so forth. And so it really came about from just one completely dissociated image. It wasn't based on anything, it just sort of appeared.
Well, that's interesting. Most authors I've talked to, we usually have a dream. But a flashed image, that's pretty good. This world you've created, it's I guess you'd call it dystopian in a way, but you said it was in the far future?
It is. The premise of the book is that sometime during the 21st century, there was an environmental cataclysm that pretty much destroyed half of the inhabited planet. And in a frenzy to try and save human intelligence and the history of the world, a rogue group of scientists started experimenting with human-animal hybrids to try and perpetuate the species, keep intelligence going. Because you can have animals survive a cataclysm, but if there's no intelligence, then all of what humanity has worked for is lost. Mm-hmm. And then thousands and thousands, possibly millions of years later, the world has regressed to a pseudo-feudal state. Technology is lost, people start believing in magic again, and humans, pure humans, have become almost a minority. They are subjugated and dominated by the hybrids that are stronger and faster and better equipped to handle this harsher world.
Does what I was reading on it, and I actually read the first chapter as a sample there, there's something about the sun?
Yes.
It's kind of baking the planet or something?
It is. The sun has grown a little bit and turned a little more red and is hotter. Okay. And the world is a lot more. It's a lot harder to live in. The world is less inhabitable than it used to be. And that's part of the reason that the hybrids are better equipped to handle the world, because they've been genetically engineered and they've been more able to instinctually handle a sort of a harsher world. And humans have just kind of stayed humans. We still have our wit and guile and so forth, but if you're not in a certain temperature zone, it's much harder to live. And of course, humans can't fly or run 40 miles an hour or any of that. Mm-hmm. And going back to the sun aspect of it, the environmental cataclysm is remembered very vaguely by the inhabitants of the planet, and the common name for it is the time when the sun grew. And that's where the title of the book comes, The Sun Grown. Sun Grown,
okay. That's very interesting. Can you give us a little synopsis of the book?
Yeah. This it takes place thousands, possibly millions of years in the future. And the dominant hybrid species on the planet are the raptors. And these are not the dinosaurs from Jurassic Park. These are humans crossed with birds, specifically falcons, eagles, and hawks. Raptor being the common name for birds of prey, carnivorous birds that hunt rather than birds that dig for worms or eat carrion. And so the dominant species on the planet are hybrid raptors because they can fly, and that flight and general resilience gives them the upper hand over a lot of the other creatures on the Earth. And the root of the raptor kingdom is a disused human enclave called Farspar. And there, the ruler of the raptors, named the Talon, is very concerned with keeping raptor dominance and keeping humans from rising and rebelling and being the sort of cog, monkey wrench in the gears that humans are always. And she discovers this piece of ancient technology, which is considered as magic because technology itself has been mostly lost. And this piece of ancient technology is very destructive and very harmful and dangerous. And so she worries that it may fall into the wrong hands, and she sends her most trusted warrior, a raptor named Cloth, to travel and find the source of it. And if it is in the hands of humans, or if it could be, to destroy it or capture it. And that's sort of where the novel proper begins, where we pick up with this winged woman, this warrior woman named Cloth, and she begins to travel and to find the source, picks up companions, and has to struggle against a harsh world and dangerous people. You're a lot of basic fantasy quest stuff, but I think I've made it interesting.
So would you classify this as science fantasy, sci-fi?
It is. It's fantasy first. I think of it as distant future fantasy, but people don't really associate fantasy with anything other than orcs and elves and so forth, and anything else is either dystopian or sci-fi. So I tend to think of it as sci-fi/fantasy.
Yeah, so, I'm a part of a group trying to get sci-fi recognized as its own genre. Things like Star Wars and Dune and so forth. So that's really interesting, though, and the names that you have for your characters. The part I read, there was a character named Machine Lobe.
Yes.
And your main character is named Cloth. What is it that drove you to come up with these kinds of names?
Well, I'm actually really terrible with coming up for names, and most of the names that end up sticking are names that are either a little more unique sounding or names that after I've written for a bit fit the character. So the character of Machine Lobe is a healer. He travels with a machine that can produce medicine. And so the concept in the story is that his given name is Loeb, and machine is sort of his profession. So that's a justification for it. But when I was writing, I was just kind of spitballing ideas about what to name the character, and I thought, these syllables sound good, and the word machine fits with his profession, so I kept it. As far as Cloth goes, that was more random. I was typing out the first scene that contains the character, and I was writing a little bit here and there, trying to figure out where the location was, what she was doing, and so forth. And I just wrote her name was Cloth. And, of course, it's a little silly sounding when you first see it, but as I kept writing, I thought, okay, well, that makes sense. It's a single-syllable word. It doesn't necessarily mean the same thing in the future that it means now. And it's her name. So it really comes down to what fits the character after I've written it for a little while. Coming up with a unique name by myself, I prefer to do it kind of almost haphazardly.
That's interesting and straight. As you said, when I first read that, I thought that's strange. But after reading the first chapter of the book, it seems rather appropriate. So,
yeah, that's good.
What you said you've written short stories and stuff. Have you just never got around to writing a novel, or what is it that made you decide to go ahead and finally get one published?
Well, I've written short stories since college, never published anything until 2009, and that was kind of the tipping point for me wanting to take writing from hobby to potentially a profession. And short stories are what I've done most. They're easier. You think of a plot, you think of an ending, I tend to think of an ending first, and then write towards that ending. Not always, but often. And so short stories lend themselves to that style. I've written other novels. I was a member of a writing group for several years, doing National Novel Writing Month every November. I've had to stop doing that because of work, but this goal of those is to write a 50,000-word novel in 30 days. So I've written other 50,000-word length novels, not all of them finished. This is the first one that I wrote and felt confident in it and felt so, I want to say proud of it, but I really felt the confidence in it to say, okay, this will not just live on my hard drive forever. I want other people to read this. I want this to be seen. I want other people to experience the sort of wonder and excitement that I felt when I was writing it. And so this hopefully is the first of many, but really that's the reason, is that it's the first one I felt confident in enough to submit.
How much influence did your father have on you becoming an author?
Oh, tremendous amount. He taught me to read when I was pretty young, and I've always had reading in my life. His books were straight sci-fi with fantastical elements, so you'd have your hard science fiction, spaceships faster than light and so forth, crossed with telepathy, psionics, hints of magic, not necessarily outright magic. And of course I had his books to read and to influence me my whole life. So when you're young, of course, you want nothing more than to emulate your father, and my father was a writer. So I wanted to be a writer too. But more than that, he taught me through my own love of reading and through his love of reading to me when I was very young. He taught me how important story is. Story is incredibly important in the human experience, and that lesson lasted with me my whole life and continues to this day. And I really I wanted to be a storyteller like he was.
Very good. That's kind of the main thing, is we want to tell stories.
Yeah.
Have you been involved much in the social media circles?
I am. Not necessarily in writing-centric social media, although I've started to join more of those groups. I am so busy with work that I have little enough time to really interact, but I'm trying to do more as time goes on. Now that I have a book to show, I really want to be involved with that aspect of it. I would like, at some point, to make this my main job. Of course, I'm not there yet, but I'm working towards it.
Yeah. Are you on? Do you get on Facebook? Have you been in any of the Facebook groups?
Yeah, I'm a member at the moment of a couple of science fiction and fantasy groups. I don't have their names right in front of me. I'm a member of a couple of Goodreads groups, as well as on Twitter, a few book-centric and Kindle-centric news groups.
How helpful have you found other authors?
Very helpful. I'm personal friends with a couple of published writers who they specialize in horror, but their experiences and talking to me and helping me along with my own writing is tremendously helpful. As I get deeper into this, I would like to connect more with other writers and other authors. And it's all really a function of time. The more time you have to correspond and to check in and to see what other people are doing. I'm a little more passive right now, and it's mainly because of my day job. But as time goes on, I'm going to get more and more involved. You have to in order to really connect with people.
Yeah. You said you're in Maine. Do they have much as far as like conventions up there that you could go to?
They do have some. My job keeps me busy most of the time, and I regret that I have not been able to attend conventions yet. But there was one just in Portland, Maine, recently, Portland Con, and there's a few here and there. I'm planning over the next year to start budgeting my time and money to be able to start reaching out more, to going to conventions and to start to network a little bit more.
Okay. There, as far as dealing with other authors, how do you go about getting, like, do you get beta readers, or how do you go about finding reviews?
Well, I mostly just send my work, whatever it is I want looked at. I mostly just send it out and hope for the best. My publisher will send review copies to anybody who's willing to write an honest review. And of course, I've got a various network of friends and family. Friends and family will tend to read it and give feedback and then not review it. I think that it's a lot easier to get reviews from people you've never met. I don't know this for sure. I only have 4 reviews on my actual book, but I'm planning on trying to seek reviews a little bit more. Reviews are nice.
Yeah, I think you're right. People that you don't know tend to review more than those that do.
Yeah, they do.
Is there anything, what are like your short-term goals for a few months ahead?
Well, I'm working on notes for the second book in this series. I'm working on plotting it out, figuring out where to go from the end of this first book. And in the meantime, anytime I have an idea or a thought, I'll write it down and kind of put it in a file. And I'm hoping within the next year to have written the second book. And I actually have another book, which is a standard adventure book, that it's finished, and I haven't submitted it to anywhere yet. But I'm planning on doing a full rewrite of it within the next year, and a submission package, and hopefully getting that out. It's a little more mainstream. It's a sci-fi book. So I'm hoping to get that out within the next year. It's already finished, which is nice, but it's not polished yet.
Well, before we run out of time, is there anything you would like to impart to future writers or those that are aspiring to become writers?
I would say if you're an aspiring writer, if you want to write, if you want to tell a story, never forget that even if you're the only person who will ever read it, you still created something. And that's more than a lot of people can say. If you never write, if you never put anything on paper, if it's art, if it's words, even if it's just an abstract sculpture that says something to you, if you don't create it, no one else will ever experience it, and you will eventually forget it. So always try to get something down, try to get something created, remember the importance of story, and go from there.
Good advice. Well, I want to thank you for appearing with us today. I'm going to have links on the podcast page to your Amazon author page and your book, and we will encourage people to check that out. And again, just thank you for being on the show, and much luck with and success to the future.
Thank you very much, Tom. I appreciate it, and it was great being here.
That's all I have this time. If you would like to keep up with the podcast, consider following by signing up for notifications when a new episode is released. There's a form on the podcast page to do this, and the only email you'll receive is a new podcast notice. If you're an author and would like to be on the show, check out the podcast interview request form on the website. Also, check out the Write On with Tom Fallwell page on Facebook. And if you have a review for a book you'd like to share, a special event happening, online or off, or you're an author and have a new book release, stop by and let me know so we can get it into the next show. Also, if you would like to help sponsor the podcast or need some low-cost advertising for your books or other events, consider becoming a sponsor. We have some great low-cost packages for advertising that is sure to fit any budget. All these links can be found on the podcast page, or if you need assistance, email me at news@tomfallwell.com for more information. That's all I have for this show, so I will see you next time, and until then, write on.